The one thing I 100% knew for sure always was that I wanted to be a mother. I gave birth to Gigi, and we definitely wanted a second child. 4 years later, we decided we were ready. It was 30 hours of labor. We were just having a really hard time. Kalia was just not budging. And finally, they gave me something to induce labor. The most amazing part was them putting her on my chest right away. That was totally incredible. I spent one night at the hospital. We went home the next day. So I got home on a Friday and I started feeling really run down. Over the course of the weekend, I just kept feeling worse and worse. I started to feel like I had the flu, incredibly exhausted, trouble breathing. I didn't have a fever, but I had terrible, terrible chills. We did decide to call the OB-GYN's office. I was told, very likely you're just dehydrated and you're overexerting yourself. You need to rest more. You need to drink more fluids. So we followed that advice. And then we kept calling because every day it was getting worse and worse. Symptoms included extreme shortness of breath, extreme fatigue, chills. My arms started hurting tremendously and started swelling. My breast milk stopped in the middle of the night and I had started vomiting. So after 5 days, we finally were able to get an appointment. And they checked my vitals several times because at one point my blood pressure was reading 88/40. Unbelievably low. So my pulse was at 121. Really scary. Again, I was told dehydration, overexertion, and I was prescribed bed rest and some painkillers. I went in for my exam on a Wednesday. Friday morning, I was blacking out and said, I feel like I'm dying. You feel so horrible. I mean, the worst you've ever felt in your entire life. At that point, we decided we need to call 911.
If she had delayed going to the hospital by an hour, she would have died. If she had gone to a local hospital that wasn't equipped, she would have died.
I was in the emergency room for several hours while they tried to get my blood pressure up.
At one point, she just stopped breathing. They used the paddles to resuscitate her, to get her heartbeat going again.
And then that day, they took me up to the ICU. I barely remember. And then that's it. I don't remember anything. I was in a coma for almost 2 weeks. The first time I heard the word sepsis ever in my life was when I came out of a coma. I was told that I had just survived sepsis and that I had gone into septic shock as a result of what they believed was a strep A infection that I contracted somehow during childbirth. I was at one point on 4 vasopressors, and the vasopressors were used to keep my lungs, heart, and brain functioning, which is why my limbs were black. My feet were black. Everything was bandaged, and I had wounds all over my arms and legs. I was extremely close to losing my right leg. It is really a miracle that I didn't die. I got really, really, really lucky. I'd only been out of the coma for a few days, and they brought Kalia to see me. I could barely hold her. I could barely hold the bottle to feed her because I was so weak. It was just so hard to not be able to provide for her and be her mom. It was really hard to be away. I stayed in the ICU for several more weeks. It was all about my wounds, how they're recovering. Am I going to lose my foot? Am I going to lose a toe? The next challenge was learning to walk again. I just kept very focused on the vision of being home. And when that day finally came, yay, I'm home. The happiest I've ever been in my life, for sure. When little Kalia was there, Gigi ran in with flowers and was so excited to have me home. And I was just so happy to be on my couch. In July, we decided that I should have a hysterectomy. My uterus was full of necrotic tissue. I had to go back a week later for several surgeries for skin grafts. Once I was a year out, my right hip started really, really hurting me. Found out that I had a vascular necrosis in both of my hip joints, most likely as a result of all the vasopressors. A vascular necrosis is when the bone dies. So I had both of my hips replaced at age 40. Also found out that I have a vascular necrosis of my right talus bone. I'm young. I have 2 young daughters. That actually caused me a pretty severe depression because it meant that this was forever, that this was never going to go away. I think it's really important for everyone to understand that childbirth is a huge medical procedure. I think there's so much attention put on the newborn, and what a mother goes through, what her body goes through gets very dismissed. If I had known about sepsis before any of this happened, I would have been able to better advocate for myself, really push much harder to say, please take a blood test. I'm concerned that I have sepsis. So it's really important to be a part of that process, not just an innocent bystander, not just someone on the sidelines. You really have to be the leader.